Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez.
We turn now to a story in the crosshairs of women's rights and gun control. Political analyst Zerlina Maxwell is refusing to be silent after receiving racially fueled death threats for speaking out against rape. Maxwell, who's a rape survivor, appeared on a Fox News segment with Sean Hannity last week about the possibility of arming women to prevent rape. She said the responsibility should lie instead with men.
Women have been recommended that they use whistles and pens, that they faint, fake faint, urinate, puke on people. The most idiotic things that have been said by these arrogant, ignorant politicians out there.
Well, I think that the entire conversation is wrong. I don't want anybody to be telling women anything. I don't want men to be telling me what to wear, how to act, not to drink. And I don't honestly want you to tell me that I needed a gun in order to prevent my rape. And in my case, don't tell me if I had only had a gun, I wouldn't have been raped, because that's still putting it on me to prevent
You have written
rape.
about this.
I have, yes.
That this happened to you.
Yes. And I was attacked by someone I knew. So you're required, what you're saying works out in reality, not in a theoretical scenario. You're requiring that I shoot someone that I know.
No, I'm not.
That is not the reality. Two-thirds of women are attacked by someone they know.
Nobody is requiring that you do it. I have carried a weapon my entire adult life, and I've had license to carry in the five recent states that I've lived in. And I am trained. I'm a marksman in the use of a pistol. I have been since I'm 11 years old. I've been a good shot. Only if women choose to. They ought to have the right. That ought to be their choice.
I don't think that we should be telling women anything. I think we should be telling men not to rape women and start the conversation there.
Well, criminals are not going to listen to that.
No, but
I agree with you.
We're not. I mean, yes, men are committing a crime, but many of the men that commit rape are people that you know. But
no man should do that to anybody.
You're talking about it as if there's some faceless, nameless criminal, when a lot of times it's someone that you know and trust.
Well, I'm saying that women need to know that these situations arise, and evil exists in the world.
Yes,
Evil
we can
exists.
prevent rape by telling men not to commit it.
They're not going to. Criminals will not listen.
No, we're not talking about criminals. We're talking about a cultural...
I want women to be able to protect themselves, don't you?
I want women to be able to protect themselves, yes. But I want women to not be in this situation. And
I agree with you.
Be in that situation. That's not true. If you train men not to grow up to become rapists, you prevent rape.
You think you can tell a rapist to stop doing what he's doing?
Yes.
Really? And he's going to listen to an ad campaign
There are organizations that do this. Men can stop rape. Men stopping violence. They train young men to not rape.
In response to her remarks, Maxwell received a torrent of racially fueled abuse on social media, with people saying she deserved to be gang raped and killed. One person wrote, quote, "I hope you get raped and your throat slit. Maybe then you understand why white men have to be armed." Well, on Monday, she responded to the comments on MSNBC saying, quote, "I'm certainly taking steps to protect my emotional health, but I will not be quiet because I refuse to be bullied into silence." For more, we're joined in studio by Zerlina Maxwell herself, political analyst, contributor to Ebony.com. Welcome to Democracy Now! Well, you've been through quite an ordeal.
Yes, it's been a very long week, but I think what's come out on the good side of things is that I'm getting a lot of support from other survivors that say, you know, I'm really supportive of your message. And really what I was trying to say is that the conversation about guns has nothing to do with the conversation about rape and prevention. And again, it's just another way to put it on women and putting it on them to have the responsibility to prevent rape. And that's the wrong way to do it.
What is Fox saying to you about the kind of comments you've gotten afterwards?
Well, you know, I've gotten a lot of support from them. And in the end, I actually don't put it on Fox's shoulders as to why I got the reaction that I did. The segment was covered in conservative media, so it was when it went up on the conservative websites when I started getting a lot of the hateful comments.
Well, you've been a frequent guest on Fox News in the past. Have you ever gotten a kind of reaction like you've gotten on this particular issue?
Well, this is my first time ever talking about this particular issue, but I have done segments about guns because that's, you know, a hot topic right now, and I've never ever received any of the feedback like the ones the violent feedback that I got this week. Normally, it's just I disagree, you're stupid, that's fine. You know, I can deal with that. You just, you know, ignore that type of comment. But when it goes to violence and, you know, people being very, very cruel, especially since I outed myself as a rape survivor in this segment, which actually wasn't the clip that was on conservative media sites. They took that part out. But I think that, you know, when I'm putting myself out there and I'm being vulnerable because I think the message and the issue is important, you know, and you respond with violence, I think in many ways you're proving my point that there is a cultural problem that we need to address.
Zerlina, you wrote a piece this week, 5 ways we can teach men not to rape. Talk about those ways.
Yes. We need to teach people what consent is. And, you know, this week we're seeing in Ohio the Steubenville rape trial with 2 high school football players. And the defense attorney is basically arguing that she was too drunk in order to say no. And so that means she's implying that she consented to everything that happened once she began drinking that night. And, you know, number 1 on the list is we need to teach young men about consent, because I think it's not that people don't know that rape is wrong. I think we all can agree that, you know, people know that it's wrong, but I think a lot of people don't know what rape is. And so there are times when young men will be in a situation where they do something that they think is ambiguous, but legally it's classified as rape. And you know, it all comes down to consent and knowing what that is.
One of the things you talk about, you raised on Fox and you talk about in your piece on the Steubenville case, which is headlined, "Why Acquaintance Rape is Not a Myth," is that most women are raped by people they know.
Right. And this is one of the reasons why the gun conversation is completely ridiculous on its face in terms of prevention of rape, because most women are going to be in a situation where they know the person, right? So you're not going to be out on a date or in your apartment with an acquaintance and have a gun out. That's just not, I mean, if you're, particularly because most guns, if you're doing it the appropriate way, you're going to lock it up and make sure that it's not stolen or used by a child. And so you're not going to have your gun on hand anytime something like this comes up. And I think the problem is that too many women, 80% of women are raped by someone they know. And so you're not going to have the gun out. And I think the most important thing is that people understand that rape happens in this way and not in the jump out of the bushes stranger rape type of way the majority of times. That of course happens, but the majority of rapes are this other way, this acquaintance date rape type of way. And we have to we have to acknowledge that this is a real thing. This is not something that we can pretend doesn't exist.
And this whole emphasis now, or these attempts to solve everything, all the major problems by arm yourself, whether it's the school shootings now and discussing the issue of rape. What does it tell you about the problems we face as a society, that we constantly see the need to, well, arm yourself to protect yourself against evil in the world?
Well, I mean, one of the things that was telling about the evil part of the segment was that rape, in many instances, and I think Steubenville is a perfect example of this, it's not about evil, right? In Steubenville, those boys are fairly ordinary, right? They play football, they're from a small Midwest town, they're really ordinary, and it's the conditioning that they received as young men leading into their teenage years that led them to allegedly do this. And so I think it has to do, I mean, the gun issue is just completely separate, and I think in many ways they're exploiting women's rights in order to promote just a pro-gun agenda, and I think that that's wrong, and so I just wanted to make that point clear in this segment.
I want to turn to a hearing on gun control measures in Colorado last week that Sean Hannity brought up during your appearance on his show. This is the testimony of one unnamed rape survivor.
The harsh reality as a woman is that a firearm is the one equalizing factor when met against an opponent much larger than me. The question of my life is, and will remain to be, what would have been different if I had been able to carry my firearm that night?
Your response, Zerlina?
You know, that's hard for me to watch because you know, as a fellow survivor, I'm supportive of her, you know, thought process, and it's not my fault, and I could have prevented it because I went through a similar process. I think a lot of survivors go through that. What could I have done differently? Maybe if I hadn't gone out. You know, you put it on yourself, the responsibility on yourself. But I think that the response to that, I didn't actually think that the mini lecture she got from the Democratic representative at the end of that clip was necessary either. I don't really want anyone to be lecturing rape survivors about anything because many of them put it on themselves. They blame themselves. You're already going through that process. You don't need anybody else to put more on you. And so you feel a deeper sense of guilt as if you could have prevented it when in reality you can't. I think that's the core of the issue.
Can you talk about anti-rape strategies that you think work?
I think Men Can Stop Rape. I keep citing them in every interview that I do, because one of the things that I did as a journalist, I went and covered one of their bystander intervention workshops, and it was incredible. It changed my view on humanity in a lot of ways, because it was 17 to 22-year-old boys, and they learned really passive strategies on how to intervene if they see a troubling situation at a party. And it's not about confronting someone and saying, get away from that girl, she looks too drunk. It's not really necessarily about that. You can do it in very, non-confrontational ways, and I think that this is revolutionary, because you want to prevent these situations before they come up. And that's why a gun is not going to solve it, because that's really after something has already begun that's bad. So if you can tell young men to intervene when they see their female friend, or a guy friend even, right? So say he's in a situation where he's trying to talk to a girl that seems that, to be too intoxicated. Hey man, maybe you don't want to talk to that girl, maybe you don't want to leave with her, she looks too intoxicated, you don't want to get into that situation. It can be something very small, and then you can stop these situations from happening.
Well, Zerlina, we want to thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Your comment to those who've written these racist death threats and rape threats against you?
I wish them well.
Zerlina Maxwell, political analyst, contributor to Ebony.com. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org. Thanks so much for watching this report from Democracy Now!, your daily independent global news hour. We don't accept advertising or corporate funding, but rather rely on donations from viewers like you. Please make your contribution by visiting democracynow.org. We need your support today to keep bringing you this hard-hitting, in-depth reporting.